Nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now if you know what you're worth, now go out and get what you're worth.
And episode 2 starting here today. We left you guys off last week talking about the beginning of Muscletone and how we started. Today we're going to continue the same story. Obviously, there's so much to tell that I have to do this, in 30-minute sessions or less, once a week. So where we left off the last time is the beginning of Muscletone, how we started, how I ended up with the first dog, what I had learned from the shows, what I had learned from the people in the dog world, which led me to decide that I was going to become a company. And today we're going to be talk about how this company became a franchise. So we left off about where I started to create the domain name and the website name and the company name, which is Muscletone Bullies. And the reason for it was the search engine. Everyone was looking how to add muscle tone to their pit bull at the time. This was the period, 2002, even prior. So it was a very common search, and Google was a new thing at the time. So it was like a, Yahoo. Actually, Google had just started. It was really more Yahoo than anything else, but it was all added to those search engines. And I wanted something that if people Googled would optimize me up to the top. I didn't know much about technology, but I knew that much. So that's how the name Muscletone Bullies came to be. Plus, my ideal bully was always to build a bodybuilder version of the dog, which I wanted a really nicely muscular dog. And I didn't want to look like Bruce Lee. I want to look more like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Remember, at that time, I was breeding XLs. So I hadn't got to the pockets yet. So, they were still the bigger, more massive dogs. There's a lot of decent, nice XLs today, but the XLs that I was breeding at the time had massive bone, massive heads. They were a very different set of dogs. The issue you had with the XLs in that particular time, which you still do today, is the longer the legs are, the longer the back is, and the sloppier they walk and the goofier they look. And even though you would get a nicely sturdy one every now and then, they would fall apart a lot more than a more compact dog. And I realized that when I started watching and comparing the dogs to bodybuilding. And I noticed that most bodybuilders, you could look at Phil Heath, you could look at Brandon, all of those guys are all around 5'8", 5'9". Yes, you get your Arnolds, you get your Rammies, you get those 6'1", 6'2" guys sometimes. But more often than others, the shorter guys hold a better structure and look wider and are more massive than the taller guys. Obviously, a taller person in a bodybuilding has a more beautiful look because there's a lot more to be distributed and the size has that wow factor. So my mind was to make a bigger, taller version of what I have today. Unfortunately, that faded away with time, but we'll get to that later. So that's how the name Muscletone Bullies came, is based on that concept. So when we created the website, it was an interesting thing. I went online and I found a website designer who was a dog breeder. She was an English bulldog breeder, and she designed websites on the side, and she made me my first website. I used her for years, and then she disappeared. I don't know if she retired or what, but I used her for years for many things, different sites that we've made along the years and updating and all of that. She made me the first banner we had, and at the time it was called Muscletone Pits, and the website was muscletonepits.com. Because why? American Bully was not a thing just yet, because we were not in 2005 just yet. So Muscletone Pits survived for a few years, and I remember selling my first dog overseas. Off of my website. I had driven quite a few overseas clientele. And I had a gentleman in Indonesia, and great gentleman, Henry, wanted one of my dogs, and he wanted a dog off of Simba. So I had, at the time, produced a dog named Blue Simba. So Blue Simba was a beautiful, massive dog, and it was my first big sell. So at the time, I was selling puppies around $1,500. Which was, believe it or not, quite a bit for that era. Remember, these dogs had natural birth, natural breedings. There was really no expenses else than, dog food, water, and your minimal stuff. So that was a big sale. It was $25,000 sale for one dog. And I didn't want to part from him at the time. And I was like, no, this is business. He's got to go. He's going to make me a name overseas, which he did. So not only did I profit from the 25 grand, I profited even more by having the dog overseas and everyone seeing him, which drew me more clientele. So reaching around 2005, I had sent a few dogs overseas by then, some to France, some to Indonesia, some to Thailand, some to Taiwan. Thailand and Vietnam. Vietnam. Taiwan came later on. So in that particular era, I had the Asian market of the time, before China becomes a thing, before China and the dog world had that big wave, which we'll get to in the future. So Vietnam, Thailand, and Europe, mostly France and Italy, and Belgium, were really, really big into the big XL bullies at that particular time. And a lot of my dogs were going within these directions. So I finally came up with the concept idea, and I came with the idea because at the time, like I said before, I was running a cell phone business, and I was in telecommunication. And the company that I worked for before I owned my own place, I remember starting with them from scratch when they had just one location, and then they got approached because they were doing so well, and they franchised to more locations. And I watched the franchise system and how it works, and I paid attention, and I asked a lot of questions, and I learned, and I took notes. And obviously at the time, I had no intention of becoming a franchise of any kind. My mind hadn't had that plan just yet, but it was information that was all adapted in. And one thing that I always tell people, every day you should learn something. Information is key to all success. Everything I've learned, somehow, some way, gets used. The problem you have is you get all this information, you just throw it out. You don't use it, you don't apply it, you don't remember it, you don't practice it. You don't try to apply it. And that's a problem. It's like going to a martial arts school and learning a particular move. But then when you go to fight, you use the same old move over and over again. If you don't start practicing the new moves you learn, you never become rounded enough. You got to practice them. It's not about winning all the time. Sometimes it's about losing while you're learning, because what you learn is more precious than the stupid match of ego that you just won. So that was one of the really important things that I feel have led to my success, is that I've always was a sponge of some sort. I always paid attention, took notes, and I tried to apply it in the future. Was not afraid to fail, believe it or not. I felt that if it didn't work, it didn't work, whatever, I start over. And that's another issue that I find very common with people in any kind of business, is they have what they call emotional time invested that they can't separate from. They do the same thing. Take an example of relationship. They're in a bad relationship, but because they have emotional time invested, they don't know how to walk away. They do the same thing with dogs. They do the same thing with any kind of business. I don't have that problem, thank God, thanks to the Lord. So it never stopped me from being able to take chances. If it didn't work out, just rebuild again, do it again. And that's happened to me many times in the past, where I've finally got on my feet and things went sour for me and I lost everything and I had to start over. And, sometimes there's things outside of my control that I couldn't control what happened, and it's trusting the wrong people. And instead of pointing fingers, no, I blame myself. So you know what? I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done business with them. It is what it is. I'll take my losses and I move on. I rebuilt. And I rebuilt and I rebuilt and I rebuilt. 3 times to be exact, I've rebuilt from scratch before I got where I am. So 2004, 2005 came. And I decided to franchise the company. And the ABTC wasn't born yet. It was just about to be born. Just about to be born. And I franchised the company. The first franchise was Indonesia. The second one was Vietnam. Those particular 2 were doing the XL Muscletone pits, was what I called it at the time. And they were doing very well. And the system that I had at the time was very different than the system I have today. And it was a lot cheaper, obviously, because we were just new. And it was really more importantly that I spread the breed out so that everyone can know about this breed than it was anything else, because the style of dog I was breeding was very different than most people. And it continued to evolve and change along the way, and I wanted to expand it across the world. And believe it or not, let me tell you how that idea came. It came from my judo training. So when I was 7 years old, I started judo, and history was one of the things our sensei taught us. on judo. I studied also aikido and karate, different martial arts back and forth, and I learned the history of them. And the history of judo, which I finally absorbed later on in my teenage time, was the founder wanted judo to become a world-known martial art. So to do so, what he had done is taken his best students and sent them all over the world. Russia, France, South America, all the way to Brazil, which is founded down today to the Gracies, who their father learned judo and changed the name to jiu-jitsu and made his own rules of the sport and, founded a new art that he calls jiu-jitsu, which is really just judo. So the idea of spreading by passing on the students across the world, the idea was the same, to take the best of dogs I have, and really the best that I had, and spread them across. But without taking too much of a loss, I had to charge for these dogs. But I had to keep some sort of connection to them at the time. Made a lot of mistakes. I got screwed a lot. I lost a lot of money. I got taken advantage of in many ways. But I had to take the chances and I had to take the risks to make that happen. Which in that particular era, the ABKC was founded. And as the ABKC came, it was a small little tiny registry with a crappy little website that has only one page on their website with an application on it to register your UKC dog, ABR, or whatever it is, to an American Bully. The interesting thing, there was really no criteria. Anyone can switch it. So the reason I made the switch is the interesting part. The pit bull was not allowed in many, many countries in that particular time. And as my dogs had UKC papers, all the dogs had pit bulls. So I could not ship them to certain countries without having to finagle a way to get an AKC or FCI document from someone just to import the dog across the border. So then once it was there, they would have a UKC set of papers, but then they would have another set of documents from the FCI saying, oh no, this dog is not category 1 or 2, which is endangered dogs that are not dangerous dogs that are not allowed in the country, which is a big nightmare, a big headache. It wasn't completely legal, but since I'm not a citizen of that country, I couldn't care less, couldn't be charged with it. But it was a way of importing and exporting the dogs and finagling around the way, and it was not the best way. I did not like it. So when I saw the idea of the American Bully, which is a new pedigree and new paperwork, and didn't say pit bull on it, I said, oh, wait a minute, this is what I need. So I immediately didn't switch all the dogs. I added all the dogs to second registry, which is the American Bully Kennel Club, the ABKC. So now we were handling 2 sets of papers. So every time I had a litter, I had to register UKC and I had to register ABKC. So I registered both all the time. And was it a lot of work? Sure, whatever. It's not the end of the world. Some people are still doing that today. Excuse me. So that's how the franchise and the ABKC merged and happened at the same time. So the ABKC was a very handy handful thing to Muscletone, and it was very necessary for Muscletone to grow. And then Dave eventually ended up owning the ABKC. I believe he purchased it from the person who had started it. I can't remember who. I can't remember who. I think it was, I don't want to say any names and be wrong. Something you have to ask Dave. It's not my story. So I met Dave. I purchased some dogs from Dave. And purchased some dogs from other Edge people that were part of Dave's group and circle at the time. And Dave realized I had franchises overseas, and he says, hey, I want to expand the ABKC. Can you help me out? And this is where the ABKC and Muscletone's friendship and relationship came along. And this is something that everybody always asks. And, why do you support the ABKC? Because the ABKC gave me the rights and the power to become Muscletone today, not to help me out on purpose, but because they were born and existed. Just their existence alone and me finding them allowed me to franchise the company worldwide. Now, that's from God, or it's from pure luck, I don't know. But I could tell you that I have always been a person who's very loyal to things that have given me my roots. And ABKC gave me my roots, allowing me to do that. And I gave it in return, in help them expand overseas. So I started to bring them, people who wanted to throw shows in Europe, wanted to throw shows in mostly of Europe, Asia, and all over. So once we start spreading the ABKC overseas and giving, the big word that there's this registry that, you can show these dogs in and they fit the category and they're not under pit bulls and they're not supposed to be pit bulls. They're supposed to be more massive. They're supposed to be this. An idea of the American Bully was becoming a new thing. It was starting to become an image, an actual shape. And then my vision started to change in that particular time. Now we're still in 2005 to 2006 in that era, maybe 2007, something like that, around that time. So they've asked me to throw a show overseas because now, yes, we have a lot of people registering their dogs with the ABKC overseas because they want the American Bully pedigree so that the cops don't take their dogs from them saying, hey, that's a pit. No, it's not. Here's my ABKC paper. It's the American Bully. The cops leave them alone. So that's how we start to register so many dogs overseas. But now that you have so many dogs registered, you gotta have shows. So I threw the first show in Europe. Most people don't know that. Muscletone threw the first show in Europe. There was 175 real bullies back in 2009. This is in 2009. In the ring. Okay, I go to some big events today and I don't even see 5. 2 sometimes I don't see. There was 175. This is way back then. And this is how fast the breed evolved from 2005 to 2009. Yes, they were more on the standard and XL size, but they were massive dogs. And the show was thrown, originally was supposed to be in Amsterdam, and unfortunately the city or the police in that area decided that we couldn't do it because some of the dogs had cropped ears and it was illegal to have cropped ears, so we moved the show to Germany. So people came to the show and had to leave. But we announced to everyone that we're going to have the show. We found another hall last minute the next day in Germany, which was about an hour or so away from the hall that we were in Belgium because Belgium and Germany share a border. Sorry, not Germany. Netherlands share a border. So we went from Belgium to the Netherlands and we threw the show in the Netherlands. And the show was a great success. I mean, it was beautiful. I think there was over 200 some dogs and 175 or 180 dogs entered the ring that day. We gave away a Muscletone puppy that year. We gave a lot of things to charity. We incorporated a lot of children to the activities. This is before junior handling was a thing. Junior handling kind of came straight a little bit after that. So that involved children because a lot of the people who came to the shows brought children with them. So the ABKC culture and Muscletone culture was very much involved together. And this was a culture of all the dog people in that era. That they were on the west side or the east side of the United States or they were overseas. We had similar culture, similar beliefs, and we all came together. This is how this whole thing was born. So we allowed, as Muscletone, to franchise the American Bully worldwide before anyone else did. We were the first ones to do it. So this is something that a lot of people don't give Muscletone credit for, but we were the first to allow the breed to spread so fast, so quickly. We were doing it before ABKC was even born, and the second ABKC was born, it merged together into one. We also were the first to throw an ABKC event in Europe, and then we threw others in the future time that came along, 2010, 11, 12, within those years. So those were the days. And my visions changed. It changed right after the ABKC show in Belgium. In the Netherlands. So after the event, it changed, and I came back and I was like, all right, I gotta find a way to make these dogs even wider and even bigger. Even though I still had the widest, biggest dogs at that event, and anywhere you went, I still had the widest dogs. This is the time, I would say 2009, 10, where some dogs start to become really big in Thailand. One of them was Bismarcky. And I had a client in Thailand, a partner I should say, who wanted to compete with the dogs that came over there who had big bone. The problem with Bismarcky, he had a lot of loose skin everywhere and couldn't tell what kind of dog it really was. But you would call something like an exotic today. But he was a registered American Bully. You guys can look up Bismarcky. I personally liked the dog for the bone that he brought to the table. I bred to the dog. I did not have much success. Everything I got was pretty bad. I had to give it away. But that's a particular time where I needed to put more bone, shrink the dogs, increase the head size, or keep the head size that I had, but on a shorter body. And I started to restructure the dogs completely. And that required a lot of different dogs. So I went on a buying spree. I took a loan out of my house, a little under 100 grand, and I started buying dogs for numbers no one has ever paid for. I would go see puppies. I would look at the parents. And I'd like, well, that's a nice bitch. I want her. Well, she's not for sale. Well, I got 15,000 says she is. All right, take the dog. Sometimes 20, sometimes 25, depending on what they were willing to let her go for. But there was always a number. There's always a number. So I took everybody that I can see and put my hands on, the best dogs. That allowed me to do two things. Number one, I cleaned the house. The best they had, I had in my yard. Number two, it allowed me to build on things that I wanted to build on, because I already understood the concept. For me to get a look that I want, I have to breed only the types of dogs that look how I want them to look, or as close as possible. None of them were perfect. None of them had all the features I wanted, but all of them had a feature or two that I required. Now it's just a question of getting them to be all into one pool and being able to become consistent. Now that took more time. So right around 2009, when I started doing all that, 2010, the big name dogs, like I said, in overseas were Bismarcky. Dax came. He just had Grand Champed. Everybody was talking about him. He was breeding left and right all over the place. Rock and Ruby was really a big thing. Champion Rocky, Rockstar, those dogs were very, very famous at that particular time. Marco Suarez was doing his thing. It wasn't as much my style of dogs, but they were very clean and good show dogs. They were just not bully, in my opinion. Too small, not enough substance, definitely not enough gait, and definitely not enough bone. So, but all of these guys had something I needed, every single one of them. So I incorporated everybody. And a lot of people didn't like what I was doing. They were getting mad. Oh, you're mixing Edge with Gotti and Gray Line and this. It's just a big bunch of mixed breeds. And I'm like, first of all, it's one breed. A line is not a breed. And two, I'm building for a vision. I don't care what line is what. And the problem is people were so obsessed with a bloodline. So obsessed with breeding only one particular bloodline, which, by the way, most of them didn't really have a bloodline. They had no consistency. And a lot of them were breeding something and calling it Razor Edge, but it wasn't Dave or his group doing it. It was just because they bought some dogs that had edge blood in them and they say, oh yeah, it's 100% edge. But you're the one doing the breeding. So I noticed all these little mistakes. And I think everyone wanted to have a big name for themselves. They allowed these mistakes, which eventually destroyed the line itself. I didn't allow that. A Muscletone dog can only be produced by Muscletone. That was a rule I always had. If you buy two Muscletone dogs and you breed them together, that is your work. Yes, they have Muscletone blood in the background. Yes, they were produced by Muscletone, the parents were, but your puppies are produced by you. And you should take credit for that. And if it's great, wonderful. If it's not, wonderful for me, because I don't want my name on it. So, just because two dogs, now it's very different, because now two Muscletone dogs are most likely to hit a home run 99% of the time. But back then, not all two dogs were compatible. Back then, you have to be very particular how you bred. It's not as easy as it is today, because one wrong pairing and you can have a bunch of horrible dogs. Remember, we're breeding extremes and we have a very small consistency of mass and substance, because that was most likely produced by fluke most of the time. Most of the people who had an extreme dog got lucky. They didn't do it because they know what they're doing. They just got lucky. Now the question was, I needed to take those lucky production dogs and put them all into one pool so that I can become consistent without luck, with actual work. Again, God creates, not me, so there's always having faith that, what you believe is going to work, but it's still never all in your hands, guys, just so you know that. So, what we did at that particular time is I started to breed all these dogs together, and when Dax became a thing, I started to breed to Dax. The story with Dax and Muscletone and how Muscletone incorporated Dax to become a big thing is a very good story. I'm going to tell it next week. What I'm going to finish up today telling you is, at that particular time, I had bred to a lot of blood to bring in all the characteristics that I needed. I had the shoulders, I had the gait, I had the chest. I was already the master of stack-offs. No one was out stacking my females, nevertheless my males. I didn't even take males to shows. I just took females just to make a point. And it was more to make a point for myself and upset people. And the reason I wanted to upset people is because when they got upset, they went on the MSN boards and blah, 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 blah. And that was good business for me. And there's another thing that, and a lot of people don't understand, is that the weakness of others, especially the weakness of envy, is always and always has been, will be a disease. So that particular disease, it can be capitalized on. But it can only be capitalized on if you yourself don't suffer from that disease. You have to be healthy. So I don't suffer from envy. I want everybody to prosper. I want everybody to succeed. So how do I deal with envious people? It's something I don't understand. Well, I allow them to just be who they are and spread their disease. So when they spread their disease, it can only come back as a positive to someone who is doing nothing to deserve it. It's just the way things work in life. And when I realized that, I used it. I used it even back then. So I would take a female on principle. And it reached a point where these guys wouldn't even want to stand next to my females. So I'm like, okay, this is not working anymore. They're afraid to even stack their males next to my females. So, but it didn't matter because I was building a reputation worldwide. So it was growing really fast. And I was getting a lot of hate even back then. People telling me, why don't you just quit? Nobody even knows where you came from. You're mixing dogs. You don't know what you're doing. You're mixing lines here and this and that, blah, blah. I mean, everything you want to be accused of, they've accused me of. But all of them are gone, and I'm still here. And the reason for that is because that envious attitude that they had is what killed them. They killed themselves. And while killing themselves, they gave me all the energy I needed to continue to prosper and grow. So you guys learn from this and take it for the future, because don't let people break you down when they hate on you. If they're hating on you, you're doing something great. You're doing something wonderful. Okay? So if you have to defend yourself on something you're being accused of every now and then, fine. But do it once. Don't continue to keep defending yourself. That's a waste of your time. So, it didn't happen. It's not true. This is what happened. And be done with it. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Okay? Especially if you've done nothing wrong. So that was how I built onto things. So Rock and Ruby, some Edge, a lot of Gray Line, some Grand Raw stuff that I had partnered up with Patrick from Grand Raw at the time. And partnered up more like took over the whole thing because he was kind of doing his own thing, was getting away from the dogs, and while we were starting together. So I ended up handling the whole situation. And it kind of faded our separate ways. He didn't want to do dogs anymore. And eventually led to Dax being added to the program. So I will tell you about how Dax and Stella breeding came to be, how I planned it, why I planned it. The next session on Monday, I will tell you guys that particular story. But I'll leave you guys off today remembering that this is how the first beginning of Muscletone and the ABKC was born. From pretty much nothing. And it was becoming something. And it was a smaller movement, but it made just as much noise as it did today. We didn't have the Facebook. We didn't have Instagram. I think there's some MySpace page. I never had that, so I'm not sure how that worked. But it was mostly MSN boards and mostly just shows. We showed up at shows or people's backyards for barbecues. That's how it was. That was the good old days. And even back then, stack-offs were the thing. So that was very important to me, to always make sure I had an extreme dog. So when I show up to these events, my dog stood out. So that's why today they call me the king of the extreme. And why I win all stack-offs, because I never left that mentality. I never left it, because that's what created the breed. That's what created the American bully in general. The ABKC was born because the UKC told us that our dogs were too extreme, as we called it today, or they had other words for it, to enter the ring and to even be bred, and shame on us for breeding them and blah, 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 blah. But the truth is, when we walked into the UKC shows, those are the dogs all our heads turned to. Like, damn. All the people who said bad things about the dog, they wish they had a dog that extreme. But because they didn't have it, they have to say negative things about it. And I picked up on that. And that's how I knew there was a business. And that's how I knew there was something to build on here. If I can give everyone what they really desire, even though they don't admit to it, but deep inside they really do, before anyone else can catch on and do it, well, I can run the market. And that's what I did. So it was an opportunity. I saw it coming. And I jumped on it before anyone else. So I guess it was good timing, good planning, a little bit of luck, lots of blessings, and a lot of hard work. So I'll see you guys next Monday. We're going to discuss about how Dax and Stella met, why they met, why I paired them, how Magoo and his siblings came to be, and the legacy that was born from that day on with Magoo, which is the new generation of Muscletone, which is the extreme pocket. We went away from the XLs and the standard bullies that I had that were still extreme to shorter, more pocket, same extreme dogs that we have today. And then we'll see you guys next week, Monday.
An envious person is the worst kind of person because they will kill you, they will betray you into the hands of your enemy. To see you in an uncomfortable position because they hate you not because you're bad, but they hate you for being who and what you are because they want to be that themselves. Come on. And they're not happy with you being that. They want that for themselves and they want to take it from you. And if they can't take it from you, they will kill you so that you cannot exhibit that quality.